I'm rocking 2-day-old hair. I got some pajama pants on, my iced coffee, and I'm about to get personal with you guys. Alright, welcome to today's video. I am so glad that you guys are here. And based off of the title of this video, I'm going to get a little personal with you guys. And I'm going to talk to you about how I don't think I bonded with my daughter, who was my firstborn, when she was first born. I would say it probably took a month. And I didn't know that this was a topic in my life or that I had a bonding issue until honestly I was pregnant right now with our third baby. Did I realize, looking back with the experience I had with her and then with my son, and then even just how I feel now, that a bonding issue was even an issue then. So I'm going to talk to you briefly about kind of the birth story of her, because that is what I think catapulted the bonding issue, was her abrupt birth and that all that led after she was born. So at 2:40 a.m. I was awoken to a gush of water, and it was a gush. And I remember I first sat up and thought, did I pee myself? And I thought, oh, no. My water definitely broke. So I waddled to the bathroom. As I'm waddling to the bathroom, I'm yelling at my husband, Andrew, get out, my water broke. So we called the hospital, we talked to them. They knew that I was just 35 weeks that day, that we had no clue how she was positioned. I hadn't done a strep B test, any of that stuff. So they told me, have some toast, take a shower, take your time coming in. It'll be a while. At this point, I was still leaking a lot of water. Contractions were definitely starting to take place at this time, and I was nervous. I was nervous because in my mind, I still had at least 5 weeks before I was supposed to deliver a baby, and here I am in the middle of the night, like water had broke. I was getting nervous, and so about an hour we headed to the hospital. Around 4 in the morning is when we headed to the hospital. So we got to the emergency room, they checked us in, they called labor and delivery. I do remember kind of pacing back and forth there because I was kind of in, the contractions were becoming a little bit more painful. So they came down, they wheeled me upstairs, they gave me a cup to pee in. I think I had to pee in a cup. They gave me, all the gown and everything, and they came in and they checked me, and the nurse looks at me and she says, I think I'm grabbing her feet. Then she left the room. She got a second nurse and brought in a little ultrasound so they can do an ultrasound, and both of them confirmed that she was breached, feet down, head up, and was not in a birthing position at all. Which is the reason why I was leaking so much fluid when my water broke, is because usually when they're head down, their head acts a little bit like a dam to kind of prevent so much water coming out. Because it was just her feet, I just had tons of fluid coming out. So I talked about can we turn her or anything, and they said because of how much fluid I lost, it would be very painful and dangerous for me and the baby, so that was not an option. So the only option we had was a scheduled C-section. It was a little after 4 at this point, and so I was scheduled for a C-section at 8:30 that morning. So we kind of just hung out. They asked me if I wanted any pain meds. I was like, no, I'm fine, but because my water broke. Oh, and when I got to the hospital and they checked me, I was dilated to a 3. So I don't know if I had been at a 3 for a while, if from the time my water broke till we got to the hospital I went to a 3, or if I was at a 3 and then my water broke. I don't know. It's all a mystery to me on why my water broke that night. So we just hung out. They had never checked me again, so I don't know from the time I was a 3 to when I actually went in to have a C-section if I progressed what I was at, because they never checked again. I would have to this day liked to know, because the pain did get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. As you can imagine, I'm in labor. I remember they came in at 8 o'clock and said that my C-section was going to be pushed, and they said, do you want pain meds? I'm like, no, I'm good. I remember at 8:15 being like, I'm in a lot of pain, I'm ready to go. But actually around that time they came in and said, the doctors are actually ready, so we're going to go ahead and prep you for surgery. So they wheeled me down. They got me into the room. Andrew can't come in first. He has to dress to be able to come in. So he was getting ready for that. They were giving me a spinal block. I think that's what it's called. And laid me down on the table. And I remember they laid me down, and I could hear the monitor the heartbeat, and I could hear that the baby's heartbeat dropped. And I listened to it for a little bit and I thought, okay, no one's picking this up. And I was about to like say something. And at that point the nurses had noticed, and there was kind of a little bit of a panic in the room. And mind you, I had a lot more doctors in the room because it wasn't just my doctors. They had a whole team of NICU nurses that were in the room preparing for the delivery as well. So there was just a lot more people in the room. And my mom had drove 4 hours overnight because at the time we lived in California and she was here in Vegas. And they had just got there as they were wheeling me into the OR, so I was able to see her really quick. So she said she was sitting in the hallway and she could see the doctor came running down the hall. So when they saw that Lily was having a little bit of stress with her heart rate, the doctor ran in. They ran in, and I remember I asked 3 times, like, is Andrew coming in? Is Andrew coming in? Finally he came in, and they started the procedure. So everything about the C-section itself went fairly normal. I didn't get nauseous at all during it. I was kind of just, I don't know, it just all happened so abruptly and quickly that I think you were just naive and you were just like, I guess we're having a baby. I don't know what to expect. I don't know. I guess we're here. And so they pulled her out. They took her to the side. Andrew got to be, went right there to the side with her. She scored, I think, like 9 out of 10 on her APGARs. They, all the NICU, team of NICU nurses, they signed her off and said she was healthy. They kind of just did more stuff with her on the side. And then they were finishing with me. And so at some point, they were going to take her to the nursery to clean her up. And so Andrew went with them. So then I was left in the OR by myself, and Andrew went with Lily to the nursery where they cleaned her up. After they were done with me, they took me to recovery, where I think you spend an hour in recovery. After you have a C-section, they like shoot you with some morphine, and at that point, I don't know, I kind of just block out. And so I remember being in recovery by myself. And like I said, I think you're there for an hour, I don't know. And then from recovery, they took me to my own room. At this point, I still had not seen Lily. I will say, let me take that back. When they first pulled her out and did all the check, they wrapped her, they did bring her to me. So she did sit on me for I don't think that long. We got a picture with me and Andrew and Lily, and then they took her, and that's when I think they went to the nursery and did all that stuff. So then after recovery, I was in my own room, and I remember being in there, and my temperature had dropped. I got really cold, and they started putting a bunch of like warm heating blankets all over me. And my mom was in the room with me, and then I remember they came in. Again, I'm shot with morphine, so I'm kind of like out of it. But I remember them pushing this big incubator thing with Lily inside of it into our room with Andrew, and they said that they had to check her into the NICU. I don't remember a whole lot. I don't remember a whole lot. And so then Andrew and her were off. I don't remember much of how I was informed of more of what was happening, what was going on, but the gist of it was somewhere between 45 minutes after she was born and they were in the nursery, one of the nurses was checking her and she could hear that Lily was grunting. And Andrew actually has a video where he was recording her and you can actually hear the grunting. So there was a grunting, which I guess indicates some breathing issues, maybe some issues with the lungs, and so that's when they admitted her to the NICU. And I remember Andrew saying he got mad at the nurse because Andrew's like, well, can we take her by to see her mom? And the nurse was no, and Andrew's like, we need to take her by her mom. And so that's how they came into the room to even like for me to see her again, and then they took her. At the time of the doctor that did my C-section wanted me to wait 24 hours before I could get up. With my son, within 6 hours, they wanted me walking. But with my daughter, it was 24 hours. I feel like, as I'm getting to this part of the story, is where I already feel like I'm getting emotional. And I didn't expect it because she's 4.5 years old and completely healthy. But as a first-time mom, like as I marinate on this story, this is kind of where I think the bonding issues kind of happened. Because I held her once in the OR, but then it was and then I saw her briefly, but then it was 24 hours later before I even got to hold her or see her again. In this 24-hour period, I was stuck in my room. We started pumping because I didn't want a nurse. So we started the pumping process. All that comes out is colostrum, but they still wanted me to like take whatever colostrum we had, keep that, and then Andrew would run it to the NICU. So in those 24-hour periods, Andrew was back and forth to the NICU about every 2 to 3 hours, even throughout the night. He slept on, well, he actually slept on the floor. He thought that was more comfortable, but when it was time for me to pump, I would pump, he'd get up, he'd help extract whatever I could, and then he would take it to the NICU. So he was there a lot. He'd come back with updates on how she was doing, what they were doing, what was going on. So finally, after 24 hours when I got to like get up, they wheeled me to the NICU, and I got to hold her for the first time. But if you have ever had a baby in the NICU or visited anyone in the NICU, they are attached to everything. She had a feeding tube. She had probably a breathing tube. I know she had a feeding tube. You know, they just have monitors all over them. And so when you're holding them, it's a big process for them to get them out of the incubator, for you to sit down and like situate all the wires, and for you to hold the baby. And then if you like accidentally like hit a monitor, the big old monitor starts beeping, and the nurses come in and they have to recheck things. Especially her oxygen one, I think, was like on her feet, and that would always get like hit and mess, and the monitors kept going off. I can hear them now. I'm saying like right here because literally it was like the bed, you'd sit here and all the monitors for the NICU would be there. And even to get in the NICU, you had to buzz in, and you had to walk in, and they had to sign in, and then you had to like scrub your whole hands and your arms, and then you'd go back into the room. And so so that was like my first real experience of like actually holding her after birth. At the time, they were telling us that they like to get them, so she was born 4 pounds 11 ounces. They like to get them closer to whatever their gestational date would be before they go home. And she was 5 weeks early, so at this time we were told 4 to 5 weeks she'd be in the NICU. Because I had a C-section, my insurance allowed me up to 5 days in the hospital, so of course I took all 5 days. But here is where I look back and I see like there were some issues, because after day 2, I just told Andrew to just go back to work. Like, I'd rather you off from work at home with us, so just go back to work, save your time for when we go home. So he would spend the night with me, go to work all day. Sometimes he'd come at lunch, come to the hospital, and I never went to the NICU when he was not there. I look back and I don't know, I think I was scared as a first-time mom. Like, I didn't feel like I had control. Like, I didn't feel like she was my child yet. Like, I delivered her, she was in a NICU, and everyone else was dealing with her, and I didn't feel like I had any control as a mom. I didn't have say as a mom. So I didn't feel like, I don't know, like I mean, I could sleep in the NICU if I wanted to. So, I just found like I'd wait till Andrew, if he came at lunch, I'd go with him. When he got off work, I'd go with him. And I remember he'd call me like, have you been in the NICU yet? And I'd be like, no, this and this, and I'm waiting for you. And I would still pump every 2 to 3 hours, and then the nurses would come and they would just take down whatever I had. But I realized, like, I never went to the NICU by myself. I always waited till Andrew was with me. I remember on day 5, when I was being discharged from the hospital, I do remember it being very emotional, because I remember Andrew and I got in a little tiff, and he's like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, I'm leaving the hospital without my baby. Like, I'm going home without my child. That's what's wrong with me. So I remember being very emotional about that. I was discharged, discharged on a Friday. Does that make sense? I had the baby Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, yeah. So I had her Sunday, and we left the hospital Friday. So I know we went home Friday, and so I know we'd go back Friday nights. We'd go back right after they did the nurse change at like 7, and we'd go back, and anytime we went to the NICU, we could change the diaper. That was pretty much it. We can change her diaper. One of the night nurses one night let us bathe her, do like a sponge bath, and I let Andrew do it. I was like, oh, you do it. And even one of those 5 days that I was at the hospital, we tried nursing, but she wouldn't latch. She was too small, they said, and she was burning more energy and calories trying to nurse than she was actually taking in from feeding. So they weren't really supportive of us nursing in the NICU. So I just pumped all the time. The NICU actually had like a mother's room set up for pumping moms. They actually had hospital grade pumps in there for you. And so they had outlets, they had everything you need, so you can go there, pump, and you come out, and then you just label your milk and give it to the NICU nurse, and they'd keep it for the babies. But they were also supplementing formula with her as well on top of what I was pumping. So Saturday I had my baby shower. We went back and forth to the hospital a few times. Sunday we went back to the hospital a few times, and then Monday came around and Andrew was going back to work, so he just dropped me off at the hospital. So Monday I was at the hospital all day. So here I am a week after having a C-section, scars, bleeding, milking, and I'm in like whatever comfortable clothes I can, sit in a chair at a NICU. And so I spent all day Monday there pumping back and forth. I was in the room with her, and she was actually doing great. At this point they had taken out her feeding tube. She was taking a bottle just fine. I mean, in that week she had like jumped like hurdles, and she just went from this fragile little baby to, you know, being there for 4 weeks until Monday. They were like, I think she can go home tomorrow. And so we were like shocked by that because we thought she'd be there for 4 to 5 weeks. One night she like pulled out, I think twice she's in the NICU, she pulled out her own feeding tube. So it was either Tuesday or Wednesday we brought her home. She had spent about 8-9 days in the NICU at this point, and she was finally able to come home. Her birth weight was back up to 4 pounds and 11 ounces because it did drop, but it was back up. And they let us take home this tiny little 4-pound, 11-ounce baby from the NICU. So then we went home. She was not nursing. I was still pumping. And so we went home to start this life of having a newborn at home. We did have a problem nursing. It took her 2 months to nurse. So I would, for those 2 months, I pumped all the time. I would try and nurse. She wouldn't nurse. Then she'd be upset because she's hungry. And then I had to pump. And then I give her a bottle of my pumped milk. We were also supplementing with formula. She would like projectile vomit the formula up. So we were going through a couple different types of formula to help with her stomach. As a newborn, as like a preemie, she did have a lot of stomach issues, a lot of gas issues. She was uncomfortable all the time. So I just had a rough time for 2 months. And I remember I would sit in her room. Andrew would be at work, and I would sit in her room in the nursing chair, and I would try and nurse her. She wouldn't nurse. I'd lay her down. She's screaming. My boobs hurt. I'm pumping. I need to feed her. And it was just so chaotic. And Andrew would do, I would, you know, do the feedings all night. And then I would pump at like 6 a.m. and then he would feed her at 7, and I would sleep. And so he'd get up for work. He'd get up, he'd pick up Lily, he would feed Lily, he would change her, and he'd keep her with her all morning while he was getting ready. And then he would lay her down to go back to sleep, and then I got to sleep from like 7 to like, she would eat again at like 9, 10, so until her next feeding. So it gave me a couple hours to sleep. But I remember I would wake up and he would be gone at work, and I remember like, I wouldn't say dread the day, but I remember thinking like, here we go. Like I would send him texts like, I can't do this. This is so hard. And I just remember like, it's just sitting, like it's the memory is so distinct to me. I remember sitting in the corner of her nursery in the chair thinking like, this is the hardest thing ever. Because it was just so, I was so sleep deprived, and just from the trying to get her to nurse, and then she'd cry because she's hungry, and then I have to pump because my boobs hurt, and then I have to give her food, and it was like by the time we got done with that whole routine, she was back to sleep, and then I would try and rest, and it was time to do it all again. And I remember just being so overwhelmed. So I remember she was a month old, and I was cuddling with her in her nursery, and I remember looking down at her and verbally saying, like, I don't know if I have ever cuddled with you or have told you that I loved you. And I think that is when it dawned on me, like, there was never a lack of love. Everything I was doing for her was out of love. Like, I loved my baby, but I just don't think we had bonded and connected right away. And I think around that time when I was looking at her and thinking, like, I don't even know if I've told you I have loved you in the last month. Like, I don't know if I have sat here and really cuddled you, because there's been so much of nursing and feeding and gas and this and that, and her projectile vomiting and changing her clothes. That was always like, just, it felt chaotic, that it was like I never felt like I had time to sit there and really cuddle my baby. So I'd say that's probably the turning point of when I really started connecting and bonding with her. I mean, I would say that Andrew connected and bonded with Lily right away before I did. But he was also with her right away. You know, as soon as she came out and I got to hold her, and when they left with her, he was with her. He was with her when they checked her into the NICU. He was there, you know, all throughout the first 24 hours of taking her what she needed. He'd come, like, he was very attentive to her. He'd call the hospital and check on her. He would do all these things that he was taking care of me and her. That he was like freaking Superman at the time, and still is, honestly, as a dad. But he connected with her way quicker than I had. And like I said, and she's 4 now, so there's no like bonding issues. There's no like scars on her or from her remembering that experience, obviously. But I just think as a first-time mom, there was so much that happened that was unexpected, that was so overwhelming as a first-time mom, that it just, all these things contributed to me feeling like I had no control and that I wasn't really her mom, really. Like, what could I do? Oh, this is my list of what I need to do. Okay, I need to feed her. I need to make sure she does this. You know, when they sent her home, it was like, she can't eat longer than 30 minutes or she's like exerting more energy and calories than she's taking in. And it was so structured and so like scary that I had this list of things. We had to check her temperature every time, and so I had this list of this is what time I fed her, this is when I checked her temperature, this is what it was, was her last diaper. It was just so structured and so scary as a first-time mom that I didn't have time to take a deep breath and really take in motherhood that first month. I think probably bonding issues might be something common that some moms deal with. It doesn't even have to be that you had the same experience that I had. I just think, especially as a first-time mom, I'm more nervous now having a third than I am the first, but I think it's because you're so naive your first time. You can do all the classes, read all the books, talk to all the people, but until you have experienced it and gone through it, you really have no clue. Like, every delivery is different, so you have no clue what you're about to experience, and just being a first-time mom, is overwhelming. But then adding the whole NICU and nursing and gas issues and everything else that led up to that followed my birthing story, I think just all was this perfect storm for an overwhelmed mom who had issues bonding with her baby the first month. So now let me introduce you to Lily. Come here, Lily. This is Lillian, my firstborn. How old are you?
4.
4? Are you a big sister?
Yeah.
Who's your brother?
Maxwell.
Are you going to be a sister again?
Yeah.
Do you want a brother or a sister this time?
I want a sister.
But it's okay if we have a boy?
Yeah. I'll be still happy.
It's whatever God gives us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are you mommy's helper?
Of course.
Are you mommy's best friend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're twinsies.
Oh, we're twinsies all the time. So that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. So if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. And we'll see you in our next video. Bye.
Bye.